Hello, everyone. My name is Jodie Thornton, and tonight we are having a webinar on getting strong-willed children to listen. So I want to start with an acknowledgement of country because I am hosting this from the lands that people would know as Australia in Canberra, the capital. But these lands are the Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and the sovereignty was never ceded on those lands by the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. So I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples as the custodians of the lands, waterways, and sky from where I am today. I pay respect to the past and present Ngunnawal and Ngambri elders. And something that I like to do when I'm doing an acknowledgement of country is also talk about something that we can actively do to support repairing the colonization that has happened here. And particularly if you are from Australia, you might be interested to check out the Children's Ground organisation. Their mission is to support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children to have their education in their own language. And so they have schools across a number of different lands that are really supported on not just the cultural aspects of education, but actually ensuring that the children are educated in their own language, which is so validating, but also helps to keep the languages alive as well, which is really awesome. So I am Jodie Thornton. My pronouns are she and her. I have 4 children. My eldest are 27 and 24, and they are my stepkids. So I met them when they were 5 and 8. So it's been a long time now, coming up to 20 years almost. And so that they are a big part of why I do this work, because when we first became a family, we had, ordinary challenges that a step family would go through or a blended family would go through. And I went and saw a lot of psychologists and social workers just to get support, because I felt like skillful parenting was really important in a blended family. And I definitely felt like there was support for me to have space for my own feelings. There was definitely support for me to unpack how my own childhood shaped how I viewed parenting. But what I didn't find that I was really looking for is the basic practical skills that we need on a day-to-day basis, like getting the kids to listen without making it dramatic or difficult or setting them up to be people pleasers, helping the kids with their big feelings. Like I felt like the day-to-day stuff where it just felt like some other people I could see were doing it way more skillfully than I was. And there wasn't a lot of conversation or a lot of resources that I could find that would really help with those practical skills. And then we had 2 children together. So our 2 together are now 12 and 10. Oh, and I've accidentally, in updating the slide, I've accidentally mistyped. I don't have a 10-year-old granddaughter. It's a 4-year-old granddaughter. I was updating that apparently in a hurry as I was doing the slides. My granddaughter has just turned 4, so she is delightful and a wonderful addition to the family. So today what we're going to be doing is covering why we don't want the standard approaches to work. So all of the approaches that people try to work, like consequences and reward charts and all the different things that are kind of standard for how we help children to listen, I want to explain why it's actually good that those approaches don't work. In passing, that will also explain why they're not working, but it's actually a good thing that our kids are not allowing those approaches to work, and I'll explain why that is. And we're also going to go through a gentle parenting aligned approach to give your children the best chance to listen for the right reasons. So whether you consider yourself a gentle parent or whether you're not too keen on it, you'll find that this approach is really good for ensuring that we're not setting our children up to feel like the world needs to revolve around them, but also we are respecting where they're at developmentally, and we are respecting where they're what their needs and what their feelings are. This approach will really get to the root of all of those things. We're also going to to talk about what you can do and how to stay calm when they don't listen, because no matter what we do, kids are not robots and they don't always respond to the way the books say they're going to respond. So we want to have a strategy to use, not only knowing how to handle that, but also how to keep ourselves regulated when it just doesn't work no matter what we do. So I'd love to hear in the chat box, what is your biggest challenge in getting your strong-willed child to listen? Um, and here are the things that I hear the most from parents. So parents will say to me, I prioritize what my children want as much as I can, but some things just need to happen, like shoes or teeth brushing or getting out the door on time, putting your seatbelt on, like just the basic things that there's kind of no more room to compromise, right? They just need to happen. A lot of parents will tell me that I'm really worried that I'm giving in all the time and that will make them selfish. Or I'm worried that I'll crush their feisty spirit, which will be so good for them in adulthood, right? It's this idea that we don't want to dim their light in order to get them to listen. We don't want to change who they are. We don't want to make them less of a strong-willed person. We just want them to be able to get along with, well, everybody at home, but also out in their other relationships. Yeah, a timely response, having to ask many times and getting frustrated. It's so common, right? Like you feel like, I don't know how many times I can ask, but also like, how many times does it take for something to actually happen? Another aspect of getting them to listen is sometimes when we're doing things that are more coercion based or old school approaches, parents will worry that they're turning their kids into people pleasers. Yeah, and then another comment in the chat box about how sometimes we can have absolutely no response no matter how many times you ask, and then they say they never heard you, right? Really, really common. Or when you're running late and you get more frustrated the slower they go, right? It's so, so, so common. Another thing that parents will tell me is that out of desperation, I've actually tried everything, including approaches that I'm really actually not comfortable with, but it doesn't matter anyway because none of it works, right? It's like no matter what I tried, they're still not listening. And the last one that I hear really commonly is I'm okay with my child being strong willed, but my partner is wanting to use old school discipline because they see my way as too soft, right? There's this idea that you're okay for them to come at this at their own pace, but it's actually causing a lot of conflict in the family and actually trying to like erode how committed you are to more progressive parenting values because the kids are seen as not able to get along the way other kids are, and then your partner is expecting that that's because you're too soft. Yeah, another one being refusal or constant arguments and negotiation, no matter how many extra minutes they've had. So, so, so common. And so I want to talk about why the standard approaches really suck. Like, there's not a better word to say it, is that when we look at what are the ways that most people are told to get their child to listen, they're looking at one or more of these kind of aspects. One is to help them want what we want, right? So that might be like, don't you think it will be important for you to brush your teeth so that they don't hurt later? Like a lot of kids, like unless your child is, getting towards the teen years, having a concept of the consequences of our actions down the track can be beyond where they're at developmentally. And or they may not even be able, like they might not even know how to trust that what you're saying will happen is even a risk, right? And so we're trying to convince them that they should want what we want. And that's really hard for a strong-willed child to do. Another one is making them uncomfortable enough, right? Making them get to a place where it's either consequences or you're not helping them with what they're doing, or like we're doing something to make them uncomfortable so that they'll do what we want. Another aspect is giving them something they want badly enough that they'll give up what they want, right? So that might be a reward, or it might be quality time, or it might be praise, or it might be connection, like something where we're saying, if you want it, you're going to have to do what I'm asking. Another one is filling their cup enough. You see this a lot in parenting groups when people say, like, my child has just stopped listening all of a sudden. You will almost guaranteed see at least one person say, how much quality time are you giving them? And whilst quality time is 100% important in terms of your relationship with your child and their enjoyment of life and really enjoying each other's company, so, so, so important. filling up their cup in order to get them to listen is not actually the way we want to go. And I'll get to why that is. The other piece is giving them the illusion of control. So we're really making them feel like they have control when actually they don't. And all of those angles are all underlying with the intention of getting them to let go of what they want, right? Let go of what's important to you and just do what I am asking, right? That's the message underneath of that. And that's actually not what we want. We don't want them to acquiesce. We don't want them to give up what's important to them in order to do what we want. It's just that we want them to have what they want. It's just that we also want everybody else to get what they want. So like in the family, we can't have it so that one person, everybody's needs are put aside for that one person. And we also want for our children that all of their needs are met. So as an example, they want ice cream for dinner. It's like, that's great that you might want that from the novelty perspective, or it's like that's a nice feeling if it's a hot day. Like there's all kinds of reasons why they might want that, but we might have to say no because we're looking at all of their needs, right? Their nutrition or their ability to get to sleep or whatever other reason you might have that ice cream is not an appropriate choice for dinner on that particular day. And so what we find so often is that we are over here in this kind of mid blue color, which is what we're trying to get them to do. We've got like one thing that we need them to do. And then what we are expecting is that we're trying to get our children to come over to that blue spot, which is where we want them to be. And if we really think about what we need and what they need, or that Venn diagram might also look like multiple circles if it's a family at one time, or with extended family, or at daycare, wherever it is, it might be multiple circles. But what we're looking for is what actually works for both of you. What would be in that crossover where we can get what they need and what you need at the same time. And that may seem unrealistic, but we're going to talk about how we get there today, because I'm not talking about like, everybody who has all the time in the world, or perhaps even all the money, because that can make a big difference about, what options we have in terms of flexibility, or how much, whether we can be late to work, like all of those kinds of things. I'm not talking about magic. I'm talking about a different way of problem solving to find a way that works for both of us. And so we want to really use our kids' strengths. So to recognize that actually strong-willed kids are extremely creative problem solvers. Now, your child may or may not be very practiced at using that creative problem solving, but most parents I speak to who have strong-willed kids, their child is actually very practiced at using creative problem solving, but only for the things that are of interest to them, right? Not for the things where we're in some kind of power struggle, or we're in some kind of lock where we can't figure out a way to move forward. And so I can tell you a strong-willed child is capable of really creative problem solving. They just need the invitation to do so and the practice and support in getting there. Strong-willed kids also have enormous persistence, right? You know this about your child. What if they're determined to find something out, they will figure it out. And so with a strong-willed child, you can trust that when we talk about, okay, so we need to find a way that works for both of us, you can trust that they will stick with that, right? They really will be able to keep going until, even when they're frustrated, they'll be able to keep going. And that's another thing, is that strong-willed kids are actually far more capable at sitting with frustration and other big feelings. Now, your child may, again, that might be something that your child is not yet doing, but for a strong-willed child, they do have the capacity. It's about the the practice to be able to do it, and the reminders to be able to do it in the moment. They are actually capable of this far more so than a child who is more likely to go with the flow, right? They'll be like, oh, if it's frustrating, we're just going to let go. We're just going to acquiesce, or we're just going to move on to something else. We're not going to stick with it. Whereas a strong-willed child really will stick there. So if we take an example, So what happens when we're wanting our child to listen is that when they say no or they refuse or they say nothing, but they just don't do it, what is coming up for your child is they're having a need in that moment. And their feelings tell them that that need wants some attention. So a random example that I've come up with here is that I don't feel important because the baby always gets what they want immediately. And that just doesn't happen for me. So why shouldn't I get the pink cup, right? And so the kiddo's subconscious mind looks for the quickest and easiest way to get that need met. And so it's like, I need the pink cup. It's so important that I get the pink cup. But really, it's not about the cup. It's about the fact that I don't understand why the baby gets whatever they want, whenever they want it, but it's not happening for me. So maybe it's that I don't feel important, right? Or it may be that I don't feel like things are fair, right? And so then if we look at, like, we're trying to use reasons. We're saying, oh, sweetie, the pink cup is in the dishwasher, but that doesn't solve the problem, right? The problem is I don't feel important or I don't think this is fair, right? And it's not about the actual cup. It's about what I need to feel important, or I need to feel like things are fair between me and my sibling, right? And so what we're trying to do is use logic at the level of, well, the cup isn't available. If it was available, you could have it, but you can't. Then the child is like, but I need it. Like, so they're not, what we would expect of an adult is to go, oh, I can't have it, move on. But therein lies the issue, is that the reason we as adults go, oh, I can't have it, let's move on, is mostly because we were trained in various different experiences. We were trained that it's okay for us not to get our needs met, right? Some of us were told explicitly that it's okay for our needs to not get met. Some of us were told in implied ways. But if you look around our culture, it's really common where, we say things like, you don't always get what you want, right? And actually, if we look at, like, if the issue is, I need to feel important, well, there's a million ways for a child to feel important, and the pink cup is only one way. And so if we think about that Venn diagram with the two circles, the things that make the child feel important in the middle are, like, there's many ways to make the child feel important. We're looking for things that are in the overlap, not the one that they're asking for that we can't do, or the one that we're saying, I just need you to drink some water because we need to have some water before we go out to the park, right? So we're looking for, where is the crossover? And so our first step of what to do is to actually ask more skillfully for what we need. So if we, instead of saying it's time to put your shoes on, or can you put your shoes on, we're saying put your shoes on because I'm worried that your feet will get hurt if they don't have something to protect them. And importantly, I've given you an example there, but that's not always the reason we're going to need to put shoes on. We have to use the reason that is actually true in this moment. This is the reason I'm asking you to put your shoes on. If we don't give a reason, it feels from their perspective like a power issue. It's like you're just wanting things the way you want them because, like, your preferences. Well, I'm not interested. We definitely do want to foster consideration on their part. But when we don't give reasons, it doesn't feel like consideration. It feels like power over to them. It feels like you're just telling me what to do because this is how you like it, right? So that's our first job, is to use that real reason. Now, when we think about real reasons, let's go to an example around, let's say, packing up your toys. So often we'll say things like, it's important everyone packs up after themselves. That doesn't mean anything, right? What does it mean? It's important everybody packs up after themselves. Well, why is that important? Or another way we might say it is, everybody's responsible for tidying up after themselves. That's true everywhere in life, right? But I guarantee your child, if your child is 3 or over, they know somebody who does not pack up after themselves. It may be another child, or it may be another adult, but they will know somebody who doesn't pack up after themselves. And so they know that this arbitrary statement of, like, everybody has to pack up after themselves isn't actually even true, right? So we're looking for the real reason. So the tidying up example, it could be, I don't want your toys to get broken if somebody steps on them. It could be I don't want my feet to hurt if I step on your toys. It could be I can't relax until the lounge room is tidy. Now, for me personally, that would not be true. I am a messy person and I don't mind if the things are untidy, like I clean up from time to time, but that I wouldn't use that reason because it's not true for me. But we're looking for what is the truth. In my household, my husband is the one who doesn't find it easy to relax when the house is untidy. And so I will say it's important we pack up because daddy struggles to relax if the lounge room is full of mess, right? And that's not like offloading or making him the bad guy. It's fostering consideration by saying, this is important because it's important to daddy. And daddy's preferences are important in our family too, right? Now, there may be something we compromise on. It may be that they are able to keep out the things they're still using, or it may be that they have an area within the room that is theirs to keep messy, but we're looking for, like, how do we take care of everybody's needs at the same time? Now, importantly, we want to focus on, are you asking or are you telling? So often we say, are you ready for some lunch? Would you like to put your shoes on? Do you want to go to grandma's house? We're asking questions that we actually have no interest in the answer for, right? And the reason we ask questions is because we think it's going to be easier to get them to go along if they agree, right? The problem is it's disingenuous because when they say no thanks, where do we go from there? Right. And so what we want to do is get in the habit of, you can see that first example is put your shoes on, because it's not would you like to put your shoes on, or it's not please put your shoes on. It's just put your shoes on, right? We're very clearly, explicitly explaining, is this a request or is it a requirement, right? So hopefully that is helpful as that first step. And so some of the time, what we're trying to get them to do is just things that are being considerate of others. And as I said, in that example with my husband, we're fostering consideration by saying this is important to somebody, whether it's their sibling, whether it's you, whether it's their other parent. We're fostering consideration by saying this is important to that person. And it's important that we recognize that kids are so much more considerate than people give them credit for. And particularly with strong-willed kids are so focused on fairness and justice. They do care about what's important to you. They do care about what's important to other people. The issue is they're unwilling to be selfless, right? And that's where our culture very often requires children, but also just generally requires people to just acquiesce, right? And for a strong-willed child, it's like it's so hard for a strong-willed child to say, yeah, no worries, I'll just give up what's important to me, right? And I had a question: what age group does given the reason why work for? So I say that you should start it like as soon as you, like, your child, if I can't remember, I reckon my kids would have been, I don't know, some very small age, like 6 or 8 months, like tiny, not suggesting that they understand, but two things that happen if we start using the reason why before your child is like ready to actually understand it and take it into account. It gives you practice, because in our culture we don't use the reason why. Like, if you start to pay attention to the communication between adults, you'll start to notice that we just don't do this as our basic communication style. So it gives you practice of getting like finding the words that work for you, and also gives you practice of thinking of, like, what is my real reason, right? But the second thing it does is that even when your child is tiny, they can hear the difference between, come on, put your shoes on, it's time to get ready, versus, oh, sweetie, put your shoes on because your feet might get hurt if we go outside with no shoes on. You can hear the difference in that, right? Even if you actually have no cognitive recognition of those words, you can hear that this is not just an arbitrary instruction. It is actually like a thoughtful, important thing. So when we say, like, what age does it work? I want to say start before that age is the first thing. The second thing is there's more to when we think about what age does it work for, what we're thinking of is if I give a good reason, again, you should acquiesce, right? But actually, your reason is just you defining that first part. I'm going to go back to that Venn diagram. When we give the good reason, we're defining that circle on the left, right? And then when they tell us why they can't do what we're asking them to do, they're defining the teal circle on the right, which gives us the chance to find the options that are in the pink overlap, right? So we really want to recognize that giving the reason isn't the thing that makes them to acquiesce. It's giving them clear understanding of what our perspective is, right? And we'll get to that next piece about how do we get them to share their side. And so I've had another question. What age does it stop working or time to tweak it? Can I just ask, are you saying that this approach wouldn't work if, say, they were 10 or 15 or 27? Like, is that the angle that you're asking there? And yeah, so I give honest, truthful reasons and have since the day he asked why, and he still refuses to listen. And that's the piece I'm talking about here on this slide, is that when we give the reason, we're defining the blue circle. Then the next piece we want to get into is getting them to define the teal circle so that we can find the pink in the middle. So just giving the reasons is just a step. It's not the solution in and of itself. And the answers come back, yes, they are asking, is it, if your child was 10 or 15 or 27, like, do you change it? No, this is how I interact with all people now, right? There's not a time where it changes. When they're teenagers, it will change how we handle boundaries, because there's a fine line to walk between their autonomy and recognizing that we also have less control. But this first piece around explaining why we want them to do what they want and getting them to participate in the problem solving to find out what is the overlap that works for both of us. It is like it, you could say, probably if your child is under 3, I still recommend using all of the words we're talking about, but you're the one who's going to be doing more of the problem solving and more of the identifying what is in the way for them. I still want you to use this approach if your child's under 3, because it helps you to think through the pieces, what's important for you, what's important for them, how to find the solution. But if your child's under 3, you're going to be doing most of the work. Once your child hits 3, and especially 4 and up, then you're both actively participating in the problem solving process. So we'll just get back to where we were. Yes, so respecting other people's needs and boundaries is important even when you don't understand them, right? This is an important message for our children. And I think it kind of goes to that piece around, if I'm giving an honest reason and they're not listening, right? Or if they're too young to understand why I need what I need, right? Or why it's important, too young to understand why teeth brushing is important because it is a risk down the track. We're still going through this process because we want to plant seeds now that even as an adult, you're not entitled to the nth degree of detail as to why somebody needs something that they need or the boundaries that they have in their life for you to be able to respect them. Now, the closer your relationship and the stronger your relationship, we do want to build the trust that we would share more details with each other, but we don't want to set the scene. One of the things that comes up for this is when people say to kids, like, how would you feel if somebody did that to you? But the thing is, different people have different things. And the example of like the messy house is like, if my husband said to me, how would you feel if someone left mess all over your bedroom? I would be like, fine. It doesn't worry me, but it does worry him. And I respect that that's his need, even though it's not something that it affects me, right? We have differences around that, but our job is to find a problem solving approach that works for both of us. And so somebody's saying mine keeps asking for more and more reasons. And so when they're doing that, what they're trying to do is, so it's either I don't think that what you're telling me is the truth, right? And by the truth, it doesn't necessarily mean you're lying, but it could mean those examples of like, it's important everybody cleans up after themselves, or we don't leave mess for other people. Like those things aren't as explicit and clear as they need to be. So it's either they're looking for that deeper reason, or alternatively, what they're trying to do is get you to back down. And so your job is not to back down and not to keep giving more and more reasons. Just say, no, sweetie, I've explained to you this is the reason I need it. Now we need to find out why, like what will work for both of us, right? That's our next piece. So when you've asked and they're not listening, then we want to move on to the next piece, right? And so what we're looking for is we're looking for what is the need underneath their no. So what we're looking to do is reflect their perspective and acknowledge that deeper need. So if you know what the reason is, and if anyone wants to share a typical response they get to any kind of request is like, I don't want to put my jacket on because I'm not cold, or whatever the thing is. If you'd like to share examples, I can use them as how to acknowledge the deeper need. What we're looking to do is help them to understand, help them to articulate respectfully and assertively what is in the way of them doing what we've asked. So let's say it's putting sunscreen on. So you don't want sunscreen on because you're worried about it going into your eye, right? Or let's say it's putting shoes on. We want to differentiate between I don't want to stop what I'm doing versus I don't like the feel of a shoe versus I don't actually want to go to grandma's house right now. And that's why if I put my shoes on, I'm going to have to go to grandma's house, right? So we're looking to differentiate what is the real reason that they don't want to do what they're asking, what we're asking them to do. If you know pretty much what it is, then reflect it back to them in the words that they could use to express themselves. If you don't know what the reason is, you want to ask questions. So when my 4-year-old granddaughter, she goes to a dance class, and whilst she loves dance, she also doesn't want to stop playing to go to the dance class. But when I say to her, sweetie, it's time to get ready for dance, and she says, no, I will say, oh, sweetie, how come? Right. And that, so it's literally my question is like, just how come? I'm just asking, like, what is the reason you don't want to go to dance? And so someone's given an example of, please stop trying to hurt your sister. You will make her cry. And he keeps doing it, right? So that's the first piece, is that if you do whatever they're doing, he will hurt her and make her cry. That's important. So I like the way you've used those words. You could also say she doesn't like it, or you can see from her face that she doesn't like it. You can use those kinds of languages as like a different example. But when he keeps doing it, the question is, why would he want to hurt her? There will be a reason that is a valid reason. If you can't validate it, we want to go deeper. So if you want to share, what do you think the reason might be? Or if you're not sure what the reason might be, a little bit more detail about the situation, like when is he doing it? So so there's always, whatever behaviors our children are doing or not doing, there's always a valid reason underneath the surface. So if it doesn't feel valid, we need to keep going deeper until we find something that not only makes sense, but it's also a really valid thing. So as an example, it's time to let your sibling have a turn at the game. Somebody will say, well, they just don't like it when it's not their turn. Like, that doesn't sound valid, right? Like, you can't just be the one who always has a turn, or you can't be the one who always decides when it's your turn and not be fair to other people. So the question is it that they don't like the way the sibling is playing the game because they're younger and they're not following the rules? Is it because it's really hard to wait? Is it because the pieces are really fun to play with and it's hard not to touch them, right? We're looking for what is that deeper, valid reason. Now, there's a couple of commonly misunderstood needs. So often these ones, to matter, autonomy, and connection, are often seen as misunderstood versus what they really are. So when a child, for example, needs to be the center of attention, that could be that they need to matter. That doesn't mean they have to be the center of attention, but they need to feel like their needs are important. Or that example with the pink cup, when baby always gets their bottle as soon as they're thirsty, but when I want to drink, I have to wait sometimes. I have to wait until you're finished with the nappy, or those kinds of examples, right? Autonomy is so often misunderstood. It's like it's seen either as selfishness or a need to control, when actually it's about, I need to have some sense of mastery over my own decisions and mastery over my own skills and actions, right? And connection is the big one. So you'll see a lot of people say it's not attention seeking, it's connection seeking. Yes, children require connection, right? But so often when we say connection seeking, we're actually using that to mask any other need, right? If let's say that pink cup example, baby always gets what they want and I don't get what I want. If people will say they're just looking for connection, maybe, but if it's because I don't feel like it's fair because baby doesn't have to wait and I have to wait, that's actually not about connection, right? That's about, do I even matter, right? Why are my needs less urgent than the baby's needs? And that's a piece where, depending on your child's age, it's really hard to understand why a baby needs the nappy change when it needs changing versus, if you need help with your Lego, right? It's not as urgent. It's really hard for a child, depending on their age, to place that as anything other than the baby matters more than I matter, right? And so we just want to be really careful when we label something as connection seeking, that it's not a mask for any other needs. Like, so often people will say, like, any behavior, any boundary pushing, any button pushing, any behavior that we would prefer they wouldn't be doing can be labeled as connection seeking. And it might be, but it could also be anything else, right? So a parent has asked, do you try and answer the why for them? So are you doing it because of XYZ? And if they don't answer, answer when you ask them. So yes, I do. So I like to, if I ask, so if I have a good sense of what it might be, I try to give that in my reasoning. So, sweetie, do you not want to go to dance because you don't want to stop the game that you're playing right now? Right? If I have a good sense of that's probably what it is, I just say it. If I don't know, I'll just ask more openly. And if they don't have any answers, I'll do one of two things. I might have a guess. It's like, oh, I wonder if it's because blah, 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 blah. Or the other thing I might do is say, I wonder what it could be. And you might see, I'm not sure if my video is showing right now, but what I was doing there is I kind of looked off to the side. And so it's like I'm taking away the pressure of like expecting an answer, and it's making it like more of a like rhetorical is not the right word, but it's like a more curiosity based question rather than an expectation of an answer. I wonder what it might be, right? So, and that example of the brother that's hurting his sister, it's like, oh, I wonder why you might need to hurt her right now, right? I'm not saying it's okay to hurt. What I am saying is, like, I wonder what's underneath that right now. You want her to stop playing with your Legos. You want her to not be right next to you. You want, could be anything, right? But we're looking for, like, what could it be? Another parent has says, we have 3-year-old twin boys who don't want to go to sleep at night and they just ignore us and continue doing what they want, right? So, yeah. So with sleep, obviously, sleep is the trickiest of things to do with getting them to listen, because the longer it goes on, the more exhausted they get, the more hormones, I think, is it adrenaline or cortisol, maybe both, the hormones that help them to stay awake past when they need to be asleep, make it even harder for them to relax and go to sleep, right? So sleep is the trickiest of examples. But what we're looking for is the ideal, like doing the best we can within the circumstances that you have of an ideal sleep routine. So getting them ready at a time that's, the best time for them. And then when you say, okay, it's time to jump into bed, and they say no, right? Or they ignore you, the question is, I wonder why you don't want to go to sleep. Right now, again, sleep, because sleep is what it is, you can't spend 20 minutes talking about going to sleep because they need to be going to sleep, right? So it's a trickier line to walk with sleep, but we're still looking at what is the issue. And sometimes it'll be their physical, like they're just not relaxed enough yet. But sometimes it will be like, why do I have to go to sleep? Like, so often we don't explain, why is it that sleep is important? Why is there a bedtime? And at 3, the closer they get to 4, the more they will understand. But even if they're closer to their 3-year-old birthday than their 4-year-old birthday, giving the genuine reason is like, I know that when you don't go to sleep at the time that is best for you, whatever time that is, the next day it's really hard for you to have fun when you're playing. Right? And give the truth. Like, that is just one example. Give the truth. You can also use the examples of like things like, your brain needs rest so as you can learn and play tomorrow, right? Being very careful not to say like you're not going to be able to play if you don't get enough sleep, but your brain needs rest in order to be able to enjoy playing or to be able to figure out how to something that they're trying to work out at the moment, right? Like, giving the real reasons can really help. As I say, though, sleep is the trickiest of times to be able to figure it out, because of the fact that the longer the problem solving goes on, the more exhausted they get, the harder it is to relax. Other thing about sleep is I do this, so this is for sleep and also for things where you've got a time pressure. I didn't take a note of who said the time pressure, but somebody else said time pressure. Whether sleep or time pressure, or if you get frustrated and can't do this, come back and do it again, right? So the next day, talk about, at nighttime, why is it that it's so hard for you to be able to relax and go to sleep, right? Asking the questions at a time when you're away from it is helpful when there's a time pressure or sleep issue or you've gotten frustrated. So once we are clear on what their issue is, so why is it they're not listening, when we think about like how we get our needs met, the culture that we're in, most of us, I assume, is telling us that needs aren't always the priority. Like, sometimes we just have to get on and do things, right? That is actually unhealthy. It's an unhealthy part of our culture, because what we do is we rely on people acquiescing to get along. And so if you think about some of the big picture ways that that plays out, is like the gender pay gap. Why is it that that is still accepted past the point of it being identified? Why it's accepted is because we have all been trained that it just is the way it is, and we have to accept it and move on, right? That's not a healthy thing. Now, that doesn't mean we can always find a way to get the need met, but we don't want to get into the habit of just saying you just can't, that's just not a need we can get met, right? We always want to go in with the intention that we can. The next thing is that the culture will talk to us about wants versus needs. So you'll see people say, like, you might want a toy, what you really need is nutrition, right? That's a silly example, but you get what I mean, right? Underneath a want is always a valid need. A want is just one way to get a need met. So again, if you want a toy, you might want a toy because that would help you to feel like you matter. You might want a toy because you want something interesting or novel to do. You might want a toy because you don't understand why the shop has so many toys if we can't take them home. Like there's all these reasons that are actually genuine, and we're looking for how do we get everybody's needs met at the same time. The culture always also tells us that it's important to understand you just can't always get your needs met. And again, it's true to an extent. Like we can't always get our needs met, but so many of us, if you think about like, even if you look at how unfair it is that in many places, like I would say most places in the Western world, I'm not sure if that's actually accurate, but let's say many places in the Western world, at the moment, it's often necessary for both parents to be working in order to be able to afford the cost of living. And you're supposed to look after your body, and you're supposed to maintain a clean house, and you're supposed to look after your own nutrition, and you're supposed to be always regulated to hold space for your child. Like that's actually that's not just accepting the way life is. That's an unhealthy way that we've set up society. And instead of saying, hey, that's actually not fair on any of us, what we say is, oh, that's just how parenting is, right? It's not healthy. So we don't want to be planting those seeds for our kids. What we want to do is focus and help them focus on what can be done, right? So the more often we focus on what can be done, the times when we can't get the needs met, it's easier to accept that. But we're still going in with this idea that we want to solve the problem at its root. And so we come back to this diagram again, is that often what we're trying to get them to, so even if we use that sleep example, we're trying to get the twins to go to sleep at this time or in this way. And what we need to find is what is the way that works for both of you, right? We're looking for experimenting with what helps them to relax. Do they think that this is arbitrary? Do they think that you don't care about the fact that they're not interested in going to sleep? Do they are they just finding it hard to wind down from the day, right? It depending on like what is your evening like. Some people have the privilege of having easygoing days and everything is pretty relaxed into the evening, but many families don't have that privilege. Many families, even if the day is relaxed, the evening is go, 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 because there's so much to do between cooking, getting everybody fed, getting everybody bathed, getting everybody into bed. Like it's quite stressful. And that's before you even add some families needing to have not getting home at the time that they might prefer because of the work situation or all of those things, right? We're looking for like, what is it that helps everybody get their needs met? And so let's talk about what happens when we can't get the need met, because that will happen. Sometimes it is impossible to get the need met. So an example of that might be if your child really wants quiet to go to sleep, but there's a thunderstorm, there's no way for you to make things quiet in a thunderstorm. I suppose some of those high-rise apartments might be so soundproofed, maybe. I can't remember. But anyway, you can see how like that's a time where it's probably actually impossible to get them what they need. But most of the time, the issue is that we don't have enough time to be able to figure it out. So we don't have enough time to get to the root of what it is that they really need, or we don't have enough time to find options that will work for both of us, or we don't have enough practice, right? This is a new way of thinking about problems. And so we might not have the practice to make it efficient. And so when their need can't be met, we want to reinforce that their needs matter. Sweetie, I'm so sorry that it's not quiet for your sleep time. Or, oh, I'm really sorry that we need to go to grandma's house for dinner tonight. When I said to grandma that we would go to dinner, I thought we would all be in a good mood to go, but you've had a hard day and you don't want to go. Because we've organized everybody in the family to come, we are going to go anyway, right? So you can see how it's like your needs still matter. It's just that we can't find a way. We want to let them know that you would meet their needs if you could. Oh, sweetie, if we could choose what time to go to school, I would totally let you go later. but school starts at whatever time it starts, because that's the way that's the time that the school has chosen, because they want everyone to know what time it's going to start, right? So we're looking for letting them know that we really would do what's important for them if we could. And we want to clearly explain what is in the way. The grandma's cooked specially for everybody, and that's why we need to go now, because the dinner will get cold if we don't go now. Or I know you don't want to wear your coat, but at the park it's going to be so cold today that if we don't wear a coat, it's actually not going to be safe for us to be at the park. It's too cold. I use that example because where I am, it's really, really cold at the moment. But you see how I'm saying that only if it's true. Like if it's cold and I would prefer them to wear a coat, but actually, they could go without a coat if they preferred, I wouldn't say that. I would only say it if it's the truth, that it wouldn't be safe for them to be without a coat in this weather. So then we want to move on to empathy. So you're saying I can't do what you need, often they will still be upset, or they might be doing the thing where they're asking for more and more reasons, or they might be pretending they can't hear you. They might be negotiating so many times. We want to then zoom in on the empathy. You really want me to change my mind, or you really wish we didn't have to go to grandma's, and it's so important to you because you're tired, or that's not the choice you would make. This is not interesting to you. We're looking for what is the empathy that reflects their feelings and their needs. If you have the time and energy to do it in that moment, we want to do it then. And if you don't, do it later. So let's say you're getting ready to go to daycare, and it's you don't have time and you've run out of patience. Maybe once you're halfway there in the car, or maybe that evening you might say, oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry that you had to stop playing your Legos to go to daycare at that time. I know you didn't want to. I know you really wanted to finish what you were doing. I'm sorry you had to stop then. If we didn't go then, I was going to be late to work, and it was really important that I get to work on time, right? So you see how I'm really showing that I care about their feelings. It's just that at the time, I was too tired or frustrated or too busy, too in a rush to be able to talk about it. Now, importantly, with empathy, we're not saying, look, I've understood how you feel, so therefore let's move on. They're allowed to stay in the feelings, right? That doesn't mean you can empathize ad infinitum. You can only empathize for the amount of time or energy that you have. But we want to make it clear that we're not in the business of saying, we've talked about it, you need to move on, right? You might need to move on, and that's totally valid and reasonable. But we don't want to give them the message that their feelings are only valid for the amount of time it takes to talk about it, then we have to move on. It's like, if they want to stay in the feelings, they can stay in the feelings. We want to, as they get more equipped with their emotional awareness and their understanding of themselves, we want to equip them to be able to make decisions to move on, but we don't want to make it so that we're only allowed to be upset for a few minutes, right? We can stay cranky about things if we are still feeling cranky about it. So in terms of us staying calm throughout all of this, there are three main reasons why we lose our cool. The first thing is we think they're being unreasonable, right? We think that they are expecting too much, or they are not being considerate of other people, or that they are being selfish, right? That's where, if you come back to what is the need, that will help you to recognize that it's not them being unreasonable. That's just their part of this picture, and we need to look for solutions. The next reason we are likely to lose our cool is that we feel stuck. So we can't solve the problem, or we can't even figure out why they're not listening, right? We can't even figure out what is underneath their need. And then we need to figure out that, and then we need to focus on the fact that the problem doesn't have to be solved. We want to solve it if we can. If we can't solve it, we need to make a decision, make a call about what's the best possible outcome right now, right? The best possible outcome may be not very nice for anyone involved, or it might be one person needs to acquiesce, but that's just the best we can do right at the moment. And so, as an example, if your child doesn't want to put their shoes on, you might put them on even though your child doesn't want them to, or you might be putting them in the car, they don't want the seatbelt on, you might take over and do that, right? We only want to take over and control the situation when we need to, but quite frankly, we might need to do that from time to time, right? It does happen, particularly in the process where we're learning. It's not just simple where you just change the way you say things and then all of a sudden your child's going to listen every single time, right? There are times where there's a process where we're getting used to this new way. And so if you have to make a decision, it's okay for you to make the decision, and you're just going to reinforce to your child what is the reason that you can't agree or you can't empathize in that moment, right? Just letting them know. Then the last reason that is one of the most common that we lose our cool is we resent that our needs aren't met, right? So we're giving and giving and getting, and then they're not giving ever, right? Or they're not giving enough, or even just they're not giving in this moment when it's really important and frustrating for you. And so what we're looking to do there is remember that the focus is on solutions that work for both of you. So instead of acquiescing and acquiescing and acquiescing and then being frustrated that they don't ever acquiesce, we want to come back to, okay, so what would work for both of us? If you're going to lose your cool, I want you to protect your needs, because once you lose your cool, that impacts them, right? Your dysregulation impacts their regulation. But if you're not going to lose your cool, if you can keep yourself regulated, then you want to protect their needs when you can, because children, no matter what age, are always expected to acquiesce more than adults are. And so wherever we have to make a judgment call, if we can, we want to protect their needs. But as I say, if you're going to lose your cool, it's better off for both of you if you protect your own needs. And a parent has said it would be easier to give in all the time going through the process for one child, but when two or more are getting ready in the morning, it's hard to stay calm and go through this process for the one child. Absolutely. So ideally you want to practice this at a time when you're not under time pressure, if you can. For some families, it's actually not an issue when there's not a time pressure. It's really getting ready in the morning is the only time it's an issue, right? And so one option you have is having that conversation at a different time. So if it's every morning, right? If it's every morning that this is happening, having the conversation in the evening, oh, what can we do to make it easier to get dressed? Or what can we do to make it easier to make sure that you eat your breakfast? And looking for those solutions that work for everybody. The more you practice it, the easier it is to find the need. The more your children, even at the age of 2 and 3, they can start telling you what the reason is rather than refusing, right? They can start leading this process even at the age of 2 and 3 with practice. I just need to take a sip of water because my throat's dry. So if you can do it at other times so that you've got the practice, that helps. If not, talking about it at other times, you say, oh, sweetie, when you didn't want to put your dress on this morning, what was that about? You want to differentiate between, I don't like the feel of that dress. I don't like the look of that dress. If I wear that dress to daycare, I'm not going to look the same as my friends, versus I don't want to stop what I'm doing, versus I just don't want to go to daycare. If I don't get dressed, I don't have to go, right? We have to differentiate between those things in order to figure out what the solution is. And so, yes, in the beginning, it can take a bit of time, but the more commonly you're going through this process, the easier it is for you to find the underlying needs, and the easier it is for your child to speak up, just to actually just say to you, I don't want to put my shoes on because I don't want to go to dance, right? So you're not waiting for them to, you're not getting a refusal to listen or endless negotiations or arguments or all of that. You're just getting the straight up, I don't want to put my shoes on because I don't want to go to dance. Okay, why don't you want to go to dance, right? And you're going through those steps. So if we look at what goes wrong when we're trying to do this process, The first one is one-way communication. So often, if we're asking our children more than once to do something, what we're doing is like we're trying to communicate from us to them that you need to listen. But it has to be two-way. We have to understand what is going on for them in order to get to the root of the problem, in order to find a solution that actually works. The next one is not getting to the root of the problem. So this one is common when we're talking about like when we're frustrated, we can be just like, he only wants it his way, or she doesn't care about her siblings because she thinks she's the oldest, so her way should go for everybody, right? We're looking at these kind of surface level explanations that don't actually get to the root of why it is that they don't agree to what you're asking. That takes practice to learn. Upside is that for all people, not just children, but for people, there's usually only a few needs that are the most common ones that come up all the time. Once you know what those needs are, then when the different examples where they're not listening comes up, it's like, well, it's likely to be one of these 1, 2, or 3 things. Like, what would be the way to help them feel like they matter in this? Or what would be the way to feel like they have autonomy in that? What would be the way for them to feel like it's just or fair in this, right? It's like it gets easier the more times it works, the easier it gets to apply to more of the other examples. It's so easy to slip back into trying to convince them. It's so easy to be saying, we can't always get what we need, or we do need to hurry up because if we don't get the place cleaned up, then it's going to be a hard night, right? We're just trying to convince them rather than looking for what actually works for both of us. Sometimes we can inadvertently invalidate their feelings or needs, which is so easy to do, particularly when we're frustrated or dysregulated. It just takes time to, the more your nervous system trusts that you can do this and it can work, the easier it is for you to stay regulated while you go through the process of figuring it out. The next one is overgiving or overstretching. The vast majority of people that are interested in more progressive parenting styles have been taught that their way of being a kind person or a considerate person is to acquiesce their own needs, right? I know you hear the language of like givers and takers, or considerate people or kind people, right? The vast majority of us have been taught that if we give and give and give, eventually it'll work out for us. That's not the same as being assertive. It's not the same as problem solving in a way that works for both of us. And so it's so easy for us to not even notice that we are acquiescing just to keep the peace, or because we think it makes us a good parent, right? We could only be in, it's more common with mothers rather than fathers, and potentially also more common in non-binary parents than with cis men. But it is a common thing, like even for some men, it is a common thing where it's like, I would be a bad parent if I didn't acquiesce my own needs, right? And so then what happens is we are at our limit of once we need them to listen, it's like, come on, right? It's really hard to stay regulated when you're overgiving or overstretching. We want to take a note of how often we're just acquiescing in order to keep the peace, and then that makes it hard to stay regulated. And then the last one is it can be really uncomfortable for someone, particularly if we have been programmed to be overgivers, but also for other people. It can be really uncomfortable being the one who has to make the decision of like, we don't have a solution. What is going to happen now, right? We don't want them to feel upset at us or frustrated with us when we have to make the decision. And that, like, again, that's something it's kind of unfair that you have to do that more at the beginning when it's harder to like when you're learning the process, you have to step more into that place of like, I just need to make a decision and go with it. Because once, like, the more skillful you get with this process, the less often you'll have to do that, because the more often you'll actually be finding solutions that work for everybody. And so that's our process. So you can see it's not quick and easy, but that's because it gets to the root of the problem rather than being like just a surface level, right? We're not looking for like a reward chart or something that just teaches them that they should let go of what's important to them. We're getting to a process where they are learning to be assertive and considerate, right? We're getting to a process where things are actually easy. And it might feel like this would take too much time, but I've got to tell you, I'm now at the point with my granddaughter and my 10 and 12-year-olds where, and it happened much more quickly. It didn't happen, like I didn't have to wait this many years, but within, a short period of time, you get to the place where it's actually genuinely teamwork, where your child is genuinely participating in the problem-solving process. And also the day-to-day negotiations, like the vast majority of the things that come up are things that come up from time to time. It's not like the one-off examples. It's like things that are happening regularly. And so once we solve those problems, you don't have to keep solving it, right? Once you find a way that works for both of you, you've got a new rhythm that works for both of you. So I want to say that it can feel like a lot, but we will get there. If you've got any questions, please do pop them in the chat box. And while you do that, I just want to talk about some next steps if you'd like some more support in getting through this implementation process. Just have some more water. I love to talk, but it takes a toll on my throat eventually. I should do some voice coaching at some point. So can you see that we're actually fundamentally changing the way we cooperate with our kids? Like instead of deciding whose turn it is to acquiesce, we're problem solving in a way that works for both of us. When we can't solve the problem, our children still experience feeling deeply heard, seen, and understood. And we get to keep our cool, and they're not at risk of becoming people pleasers or letting go of who they really are. Or I should add, they're not at risk of being selfish or people that are like, when people use the word bossy, but it's like a negative connotation. We're not raising people who are that kind of bossy. We're raising people who are actually willing participants in a joint cooperation, right? We're working together to find solutions. If you're feeling confident at this point, remember just to take a progressive implementation approach. So you want to improve as you go and just do pieces at a time. Don't feel like you have to remember everything all at once, and don't feel like as soon as you get it right, your child's going to listen immediately. It does take some time to get into this new rhythm. We do want to expect improvement within a week, right? If it's not improving within a week, like if you don't get a chance to try it in a week, of course, we're not going to expect improvement in a week. But if you have some opportunities, not every moment of every day, but just a handful of opportunities in a week, you're having that time to give it a go, you should see things get easier within 1 week, and not the whole way, but just an improvement. If you're not seeing improvement within a week, that means something needs to shift so that it works better for your child or for you. Once you have it sorted, watch for signs that you're falling back into old habits. It's very easy to fall back into, oh, but if you just do it my way, it would be so much easier, right? We want to make sure that we get into a place where we're really embedding this so it's your new way forward. And this is what we're really bringing together. We're bringing together the emotional awareness, communication skills, and making it your default response so that it's easy to get your child to listen no matter what is happening. We want to make it so that it's easy to get there. Part of that process is learning how to hold space for their feelings, using their feelings to identify what the needs are underneath, clearly articulating their feelings and needs, being curious about other people's feelings and needs. And then when we're communicating it, we really want to be focusing on solutions that meet everybody's needs, having healthy boundaries when there's no workable solution, and healthy repair after conflict. When we're making it the default response, we're building the habits through neural connections. We're also sometimes needing to heal, disconnect, or parent around any baggage that we have that's getting in the way of us implementing this. And also we're recognizing and releasing the unhealthy cultural messages. So those things like it's you should acquiesce, a good person would acquiesce, right? And so I've had a question, do you feel this works the same way for children with suspected ADHD? Absolutely, the principle works. The different or the difference is with a child with suspected ADHD, we want to make sure that we're very attuned to what they need. So a child with suspected ADHD, we would want to have it's a potential that a child with suspected ADHD will not find an extended problem solving conversation. Their capacity to like participate in for a long time wouldn't necessarily expect that. Some will, some won't. So that what might mean that we have to chip away at it rather than just doing like one big conversation about what's going on at this moment. Also, with a child with suspected ADHD, often what we're looking for is the things that are most commonly getting in their way. It could be sensory, it could be their executive functioning skills. So, as an example, go and get your shoes on can be tough for a child with suspected ADHD from an executive functioning perspective, right? And so the principle still works. It's like what works for me, what works for you. Like we're looking for what is in the overlap. The principle still works. You may find that it's more challenging. You also may find, I find with parents who, so I have a biased sample. The parents who work with me that have neurodivergent children, they have seen the work that I like, they've seen the content that I put out and they've decided that it would be helpful for them. But within those parents, we often find that by respecting the child's genuine needs and the child's autonomy and the child's ability to advocate for themselves, often they're not getting that outside of the home because our world is so built for neurotypical people, not just children, but people. Often we get much quicker results with kids who are suspected ADHD because of the fact that we're actually looking at what is the root cause rather than just assuming that they can do things exactly the way a neurotypical child would in the same example, right? So sometimes the process takes longer, sometimes it's quicker, but the principle still applies. Like what is underneath of their needs, which, as I said, sometimes or more frequently we see sensory needs and executive functioning needs coming up. But it can be, again, it can be any needs that are going on underneath of there. So if you would like to do this together, this implementation process, then I recommend working together over 4 weeks. We would do 4 45-minute sessions over Zoom where we're looking at recognizing the needs at play in your most common tricky situations. So the parts where they really struggle to listen, so it could be bedtime, it could be getting ready in the morning, whatever the issue is that comes up most often, I can help you recognize those underlying needs. I've been doing this work now for 9 years with parents, and it's often easy for me. If you give me a detailed description of how they're responding right now, I can often, with pretty good accuracy, figure out what's going on underneath of it. If I can't, excuse me, I can give you some things to try so that we can figure out what is that underlying need, and both your child's, but also your underlying needs, because sometimes those aren't as obvious as we think they might be. I'm also really experienced and skilled at finding solutions that work for both of you. So things that might not be obvious because you are in the thick of it, it might not be very obvious that, oh, if we just do it this way, that might work for both of you. And because I've been helping parents in a variety of family situations and in a variety of levels of privilege and you know, a variety of personalities involved, I've got a lot of experience in finding what is the solution that can work in a situation that feels like there isn't anything that would work for both of you. The next piece is getting confident making decisions when there's no solution. So when those moments happen where it's not actually working, being able to decide, okay, this is what we're going to do. It's the best available option, and I can be comfortable and stay regulated when I'm making those decisions. That piece can be really important at just being able to keep going with the implementation of this process. I can also help you to build your skills to hold space for their feelings so they can accept the no when they need to accept the no. If you still need it. So for most parents, once we do these 4 weeks, your emotions are actually really much easier to manage, right? Your frequency of getting dysregulated will be much lower for most parents. Now, for some parents, once we get a couple of weeks in, their regulation is still a real struggle. And so if you still need it, I can help you find strategies that help you stay regulated so you can keep your cool even when things aren't working. Not everybody needs that, but some people will. And I can help you with that if it's something that you do need. And so we do that together in a 4-session package, which is 197 Australian dollars. And you can grab that at jodithornton.com/4, which I will put into the chat box so that you've got a clickable link. And then another question has come through saying, so our situation is a 3.5-year-old with suspected pathological demand avoidance. And sometimes his answer is because I just don't want to. And I struggle to get past this without reverting back to things my parents would have said. So too bad, suck it up, and still having moved through the situation. And that's so common because it is really hard. Like, even if we go into it with the intention of wanting to be respectful of, like, well, his suspected pathological demand avoidance, but even if he didn't have that suspected condition, even if we go into the situation with, like, I really want to be kind and considerate, I really want to respect, like, his autonomy or his, like, where he's at, when it's just stuck and their answer is just like, because I don't want to, it can be so hard not to just slip back into those things that are, not necessarily your personal preferences about how to respond. And what we're looking for here, the number one thing I would be looking for is when he says, I just don't want to, I want you to use that strategy I was talking about where I say, oh, I wonder what it might be. That it does 2 things. It invites him to think without being pressured, because with pathological demand avoidance, if that's what he has, and I say if, not, I'm not questioning it, I'm just saying because you're saying it's suspected, you're not sure yet. If it is pathological demand avoidance, it is so important for them not to feel pressure in questioning. And sometimes a straight question can feel pressure even in and of itself. And then also it invites him to think about it, but it also gives you a second to think about it too. Because usually at 3.5, or 3.5 is the weird way to say, for me to say that out loud, like, it makes sense in writing, but in spoken word at 3.5. At 3.5, often we can see the pattern of why it is happening. We can see the pattern of when he's refusing, and we can see, like, what the potential needs underneath that might be, and we can figure it out, right? So at 3.5, that is something that if you start to look at, like, what are the patterns of when this comes up and figuring out, like, what might it be, that you could come up with options or ideas to try to see if it works. And that would be something, if it's something that you're interested in, that's definitely something I can help with, is looking at those patterns of, like, what are the clues about how he responds? What are the clues in the patterns of when it happens? What are the clues about when this started, when it's more intense and when it's easier? Like, that's definitely something that my experience can help, if that's something that you would be interested in working together on. But definitely, so that, because I just don't want to, well, now I'm really stuck, right? Because this is what's needed. And I'd also, when I just don't want to, come back to your reasons, particularly for pathological demand avoidance, is like, we want to look for, like, what how clearly are we expressing the reason of why something needs to happen? This is very easy to be, particularly for the things like you have to brush your teeth every day. It's like, do I really have to have the conversation every day? Like maybe, like not forever, but maybe for a time, if their association has become that this is a power issue or like a arbitrary issue. Sometimes they're not even actually listening when it comes to the reasons. And so we really want to go back to it's like, I'm really stuck because this is why I need you to brush your teeth. But I wonder why, like, why don't you want to brush your teeth? Right. You can see like we're coming back into like, what are my reasons and what would your reasons be? PDA is definitely a trickier situation, but not unsolvable, right? PDA really requires, if that is what happened, what he ends up having, really requires you to get into that collaborative problem solving because they're so sensitive to any like overstepping of their autonomy, right? It's a really, really like it is a solvable issue. Like I'm not saying the PDA is a solvable issue. The impact of the PDA on the dynamic is a solvable issue, but it does take a lot of skill to be able to consistently do it so that it's easy on you and easy on your child as well. So now I've come to the end of everything that I wanted to cover. So if anyone has any questions, and whether you would like to ask your questions in the chat box, or if you'd like me, I can stop the recording now and we could talk live. You could jump onto video if you'd like to. I'll just give it another minute or two just to see if anyone has any questions they want to put in writing. Otherwise, I'll stop the recording and ask if anyone wants to jump on and chat before we wrap up. I haven't done too bad. It's 20 minutes over. I really try to finish this by within the hour, but it's like it's a lot to cover. And as you can tell, I like to talk and I like to use a lot of words, but learning to be more succinct as time goes on. Beautiful. Okay, so I will stop the recording now, and then anyone who's still here who would like to jump on, or you don't have to be on video, but you could jump on live if you would like to. So I'll just stop that recording now.